Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on unplugged activities for teaching computing at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. My name is Tim Wilson. I am your host today, and Martin Bailey is your presenter, for whom I will shortly introduce you. I am one of a team of CAS community outreach managers operating throughout the country. I'm responsible for managing CAS communities of practice across the Midlands and also a large part of the Southwest. And we do this as part of the National Centre for Computing Education. This webinar is the latest part of the CAS Virtual Showcase, which is our 2-week extravaganza of over 50 webinars designed to support the CAS community. And we are already into day 4. A few bits of housekeeping before we begin. If you have questions, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. All attendees, so all of you, will be in listen-only mode. Questions are our only means of communication, so between you and the speaker. So the top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. So please do feel free to ask questions. Martin will answer your questions. There are a couple of natural points at which he will stop to answer them, and I will ask them on your behalf. Finally, you will also find a handout for today's session in the control panel. So you will find a section called handouts. There you can download the PDF which follows Martin's presentation. So it's a good way of following along today. If you have tweets, or if you have messages on social media, please do tweet using the hashtag CAS Virtual 20. Other than that, I think this is going to be a really fun and informative session. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Martin Bailey, who will take it from here. Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. So just a quick little background as to who I am and what angle I'm speaking to you from today. So my name is Martin Bailey. First and foremost, I'm a primary school teacher myself. I've been for 20 years now in the northeast of England. I currently have the rather glamorous sounding title of Digital Enrichment Leader at Lanchester EP Primary School in County Durham. So I'm there 2 days a week, oversee the teaching of computing from EYFS through to year 6, as well as looking at how computing's embedded across the curriculum. I also run my own company, Animate Educate, where I work as a computing advisor, computing consultant in schools around the UK, around the world at times, and I'm also a lecturer in primary computing at Durham University. So the things I'm going to share with you for the next 45 minutes or so are things that I very much used in the classroom myself at my own school that I found have worked well in the schools I've visited, and also that I've had a positive response when I've been doing training, whether with students or with other staff around the world. So we're very much thinking this morning about the unplugged side of computing. And I suppose it is a little bit of a cultural change for staff, for pupils. When they hear the word computing, they naturally think about being sat in front of a digital device, whether that be a desktop computer, a laptop, or a tablet. But we're going to think about the physical side of things today and how the physical combines with the digital. So hopefully my slides are advancing here. Gotta love when things where you do a little test and yep, just a little bit of a delay there. So I've lost my camera now though. Hopefully you can still see me okay. So if we look back sort of 6 years ago, it's quite scary to think that 6 years ago it was the time when we're talking about the new national curriculum, and we had the change from ICT to computing. And although we are 6 years on now, I think what we've got to remember is that it wasn't just ICT becoming computing 6 years ago. It was a whole change to the national curriculum, and probably quite understandably subjects like English, math, science took the precedence in schools. So we probably shouldn't be too surprised that really 6 years on, lots of schools are still struggling a bit. Lots of schools haven't properly made the transition from ICT to computing. And if we look at the very first sort of couple of lines of the purpose of study, it says a high quality computing education equips pupils to use computational thinking and creativity to understand and change the world. And it's those two words there, computational thinking, that in many ways we're going to concentrate on today. thinking like a computer, getting kids into that mindset. Simply sitting kids in front of a digital device and going through sort of task after task isn't going to sort of develop that. We need to give them sort of tasks that they can do, that make them sort of these computational thinkers. And I think it's really important that staff understand the vocabulary that goes around this, because most staff in primary schools, they're not going to be computing experts. So if they hear words like programming and coding, it probably does sort of bring up images like what you're seeing on the screen there. They're almost thinking like binary numbers and something really sort of highfalutin. But do they understand words like algorithms? Do they understand the difference between an algorithm and a program and how the two things go hand in hand? And that's what these unplugged activities I tend to find help with really well. So we're going to start with a little practical activity. I did put on the pre-show notes to have a sheet of A4 paper in front of you. If you have, great. If not, it's something that you can have a go at afterwards. So we'll think about sort of some of that vocabulary, and probably sort of the one word that I tend to find is put fear into people more than any other over the last 6 years is this word algorithm. And of course you get slightly different definitions, but I would have as a definition of an algorithm a precise step-by-step set of instructions to achieving a specific goal. So this is a little task I often do when I do staff training sessions in school, is a little bit of an icebreaker, but also as a way of getting staff into this mentality of what an algorithm is, but starting straight away with a physical activity. So I suppose in some ways it's a little test as to how good I am at delivering an algorithm and how good you are at following an algorithm, these precise step-by-step set of instructions. So if you do have a sheet of paper, first of all, can you take that sheet of paper and have it in the portrait position? So you've got the longest side running from the ceiling to the floor. And we're going to fold that bit of paper in half, and we're going to fold it in half by making a horizontal line across the middle. You've got a little diagram there to demonstrate step one. So if you just bring the top two corners to the bottom two corners. So I'll try to multitask doing this while you're online. And just make a fold. So you've got the fold now at the top of the bit of paper. The fold is closest to your ceiling. And we're going to find the center point of that folded line. So we're going to find the center point by just folding either from the right to the left or the left to the right, and just put a little nip in the middle. We're not completely folding it in half. We're just putting a little nip there in the middle of the center point. So we've found the center point of that line. And we're now going to make two right-angled triangles. We're going to make two right-angled triangles by folding from the right-hand side to the middle and from the left-hand side to the middle. So depending on which way around you've got it, it will either look like that or like that. If you can have the bit facing you where you can see the two right-angled triangles, and we'll have the point sort of closest to the ceiling, so the point pointing upwards. So at the bottom, you should find there's almost like two flaps. You should be able to put your fingers in between. So if you look at the side where you've got your two right-angled triangles, if you can just fold up to make a horizontal line along the base of those two right-angled triangles. So you're folding up so that you have a horizontal line running along the base of those two right-angled triangles. And then if you turn it over onto the opposite side, we're going to do exactly the same on the back. We haven't got the right-angled triangles to help us this time, but if you fold up so that the line runs parallel with the horizontal line that you made on the front. So what we've now got is something that looks like that. Might be that we've made a hat. We might be celebrating the fact that we're still out of school, or that the summer holidays are approaching, or celebrating the fact that children are coming back into school a bit more. Or it might be that we've made a boat. And in this ever-changing world of primary computing, it might seem a little bit like turbulent water still, even 6 years on. You might be frustrated at lessons that your staff are delivering, or the lack of subject knowledge that they've got around computing. So with that in mind, let's tear the tops off our boat. So just tear the top sort of off your boat there. And then there's no subject like computing for causing us sort of frustrations. The internet's not down, the printer's not working, somebody hasn't charged the iPads or the tablets or whatever it might be. So with that in mind, let's tear the fronts off our boats. So let's just rip the fronts off our boats there. And then, of course, there's the financial pressures of the subject. Even though we're talking about unplugged things today, there's some things I'm going to show that will have a little bit of a cost to them. And certainly the digital side of the subject has an awful lot of cost, probably more than any other area of the curriculum. So with that in mind, let's tear the backs off our boats. And if we now just fold down and open out, what we might discover is that we haven't actually made a boat, but we made a life jacket. And actually what today is all about is how to stay afloat in this ever-changing world of primary computing, and how to give our colleagues that little bit of security in teaching a subject that they're not necessarily that familiar and comfortable with. So that's an activity you can do with staff, but it's type of thing that you could do. You can just change the wording as to why you tear bits off the front, the back. It's certainly something you could do with Key Stage 2. But I think if you're doing sort of training with colleagues, you know, you're disseminating some of the things from this session, it's just a really nice way of getting them started with a physical unplugged activity. So let's just see if I can get this back now to my slides. So yep, we weren't making a boat, we were actually making a life jacket. So if we think about those sort of computer science, the programming, the coding objectives at Key Stage 1, we've got 3 objectives of the 6. Now the top 3, if you look in the national curriculum, the top 3 sort of have that programming and coding element to them. And I think as a non-specialist, you can look at that and pick up sort of computer and think, what the heck am I supposed to be doing here? There's quite a lot of sort of tricky words here that as a non-specialist you might not be that familiar with. So there was a guy I seen about 6 years ago, sort of when the national curriculum was coming in. He's become a good friend since, Phil Bagg. Highly recommend follow him on Twitter. I put his Twitter handle there, @BaggyPR, and he has a great website, coded.co.uk. But what I've seen Phil speak sort of, 2013-14, he said, think about the Key Stage 1 objectives a bit like a burger. In that, you've got this big meaty objective, create and debug simple programs. But the other 2 objectives are like the bread, the bit that holds it in place, the bit that actually makes it into a burger. So understand what algorithms are, how they are implemented as programs on digital devices, and that programs execute by following precise and ambiguous instructions, and use logical reasoning to predict the behavior of simple programs. So, children go through things very clearly, step by step. When they're making a prediction, it's not just a wild guess. It's, it's based on thinking about where something's going to be at a certain point and what actions are going to have, and so on. I think, again, for your colleagues, that's a nice way of looking at it. When we take that bread at the top there, this idea of almost thinking about, the difference between algorithms and programs, and that the need to be precise and unambiguous. And this is where, again, the unplugged activities can really help, and where I think particularly we go back to EYFS and Key Stage 1, as we're thinking about at the minute, how they're absolutely core to developing computational thinking that we can then sort of use in a more formal programming context as children sort of develop into Key Stage 2 and so on. So to me, this is the essence of getting primary computing right. And before we just sort of, dive into sort of unplugged activities, before staff start banning about words like algorithms and program, because I tend to find that often staff don't really know the difference. They think it's exactly the same thing. To me, all staff need to understand this slide. And if I do like staff training, I say, look, at the minute you're probably sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is going to be the most boring staff training ever. I just haven't got a clue. And I get that, because if I look back to when I was teaching full time, a subject like music wasn't my subject specialism. I really can't even sort of, clap in time and so on. So if somebody came out and was doing like a music staff training session and they were talking to me about timbre or whatever, it would be going straight over my head and I wouldn't get it. So I totally get that when I'm talking about algorithms and debugging and everything else, that 60-70% of staff will feel exactly the same as I did when I was having music staff training and so on. But if we take this through step by step, so an algorithm is written by a human for a human to understand. So if we take that example of the life jacket there, that was created by me as a human for you as fellow humans to be able to understand. Algorithms can be written in any format though. And again, I think people hear the word algorithm and they think very formally, they think flowcharts and stuff like that. But if we are stepping this right back to EYFS, to Key Stage 1, we need to realize that there can be any format. It can be pictures, it can be words, it can be diagrams, it can even be songs. As long as it is a precise step-by-step set of instructions to achieving a goal, it is an algorithm. And remember, it doesn't have to have any use of technology whatsoever. Programs, though, are written by humans for computers to understand. We still, as human beings, need to be able to understand them, otherwise we couldn't write them in the first place, we couldn't debug them, but we've created a program for the very reason that a computer, a digital device, can understand it. And this is the bit for staff to really get their head around. All programs are algorithms, but not all algorithms are programs. By the very definition, a computer program will be an algorithm, a precise step-by-step set of instructions to achieving a particular goal, but not all algorithms are programs. My little life jacket there was an algorithm, but it wasn't a program. So to be a program, the algorithm must be written in a language that the computer can understand. So I think it's really important that you take time on inset days, as part of CPD, staff training session, whatever it may be, to really ensure that staff understand this bit first, and then there's a reason to doing, the plugged and the unplugged, that can sort of see why it's really important that in computing lessons at EYFS at Key Stage 1, you are doing some of the unplugged activities, and you're not just defaulting to like, oh, I did computing this week because we did a bit of research on the tablets or whatever it might be that comes along. Some of the best computing lessons now will involve no use of technology whatsoever. So what type of things can you do? Where would you start? Well, to me, if I was doing a lesson sort of EYFS, early Key Stage 1, I would start with something like the hokey-cokey. The hokey-cokey really is what it's all about. You put your left leg in, your left leg out, in, out, you shake it all about. A precise step-by-step set of instructions to achieving a specific goal. What is the goal? To do the hokey-cokey. How would you do it? Well, there's the precise step-by-step instructions. But how would that actually look as a lesson or a series of lessons? Well, the first time, I would just actually play the hokey-cokey and get the children actually doing it. Well, what are they doing there? They are following an algorithm, a precise step-by-step set of instructions. But if you've ever tried doing the hokey-cokey, with a group of children, they're not all going to be doing it at the same time. They'll have their wrong arms in, some will be in when they should be out, and probably lots of them will be sort of sliding on the knees across the hall floor. So we need to make some changes. What are we doing? We're debugging. We are finding and fixing errors in our algorithm. Then the second time I play it, I might sort of pause. So if we've just put our left arm in, what do you think is going to come next? Oh, you think it's going to be your left leg, Johnny? Why do you think that? Well, I think that, Mr. Beatty, because I think we're going to do all the left-hand side of our body. There's some logical reason there, isn't it, what you're saying? Somebody else may, I think we're going to do our right arm next. Why do you think that, Jessica? I think that because we've just done our left arm, so we'd now do our right arm. It follows. So you can see how we're teasing out that sort of, there's logical reasoning, they're predicting behavior. But then the third time, what I would do, I'd maybe find like an instrumental version of the hokey-cokey, and I would get children to come up with their own arms. It doesn't have to be left arm in and right arm in, isn't it? You could put both your arms in. You can come up with other sort of actions there. What are children then doing? They're actually sort of writing and creating their own algorithms. Or sometimes I come into the hall and I've got like, what would almost look like characters off toilet doors, and I've coloured in the left arm, the right arm, and stuff like that. But then as I walk into the hall, I sort of drop all my cards all over the hall floor, and then when I blue tap them on the hall wall, I say to the children, have we got that right? Is that the right order? No, Mr. Beatty, you've got all muddled up. Come on then, sort of, whoever it may be, you come and sort them out for me. What are they doing? They are debugging, aren't they? If they're sort of physically moving about your cards on the hall wall, they are debugging your algorithm for me. But then there's loads of action songs that we can sort of use and do, if we want to go a little bit retro. So whether it be something like head, shoulders, knees and toes, wind the bobbin up, I'm a little teapot, whatever it may be, I'm sure you've got loads of things that you could do as well. So I think it's really important that we have these very first starting steps as something that not only the children are happy and comfortable with doing, but that staff are as well. Suddenly you start putting these ideas across to EYFS to year one. Is that what I'm meant to do? I thought I had to get them doing, sitting in front of a computer, sort of, writing lines of code and stuff like that. No, we need to start right at the beginning at things that sort of would normally be part of an EYFS a year one classroom. So what else can we do from a practical point of view, from an unplugged point of view, and how again do we get staff into this mentality? Well, I think if we want to really explain to somebody the difference between an algorithm and instructions, use an example like put on your shoes. If you were a Key Stage 1 teacher and you were doing some instructional writing, and you said to a child, write a set of instructions as to how you get ready. If they said, and finally put on your shoes, you'd be very happy as a Key Stage 1 teacher. Finally put on your shoes is perfectly fine as a set of instructions. But it involves some sort of logic. It involves something that almost like, well, you've done this before. You know what's actually involved in putting on your shoes. But as you think about an algorithm, we need to be precise. Put on your shoes is not just a single instruction. We don't just jump in the air and land in our shoes. So think about what all the actual steps involved are in putting on your shoes, even as an adult. Do you hold your right shoe with your right hand? Do you hold it with your left hand? How do you get your toe to the bottom? Is there zips? Is there Velcro? Is there laces? Everything else that's involved. So an algorithm has to be much more precise. And I think, again, if you give that type of example to start to get it, to start to understand the difference between algorithms and instructions, they're starting to understand how, all this work on algorithms leads into actually sort of, being a good sort of programmer and the link between algorithms and programs. So if you get that 5 minutes sort of at the end of the day before play and whatever it might be, get a child out the front, what about putting on your coat and something like that? Think about all the steps that's involved in like actually putting on your coat and how you zip it up and your hood and how you get the arms down and everything else. These are all things that are happening all the time in EYFS and Key Stage 1 classrooms, but we don't talk about them in the context of algorithms. We don't think about it as being like an unplugged computing activity. But of course, there's loads that we can tease out of that. Likewise, make use of things that you have in your schoolgrounds. Lots of us in the coming weeks are outside more than ever before. You've probably got things like trim trails. You've got line markings on the ground. In a PE lesson, use the benches, use the hoops, get children almost being sort of like a robot sort of there. And can you sort of navigate each other around so that children are having an experience of following algorithms, they're having an experience of creating algorithms for other people, and maybe as again into say year 2, they're actually formally sort of writing it down as well. But take the opportunity whenever you've got a minute here, 2 minutes there, often if I've, for example, if I've got a bit of paper or something that needs to go in the bin, rather than just saying, Ben, can you put that in the bin for me? Right, we're going to make Ben into a robot. Who can program Ben to sort of, make his way to the bin to put something in the bin? We take these like opportunities all the time when it be like maths and English, we'll do a quick little counting game or whatever. We need to take these opportunities in the classroom to actually teach sort of unplugged computing as well. And even with the youngest kids, they're not going to be talking about turn 90 degrees clockwise or anti-clockwise, but you can be saying like turn to face the door, turn to face the window. You can gradually get more sort of precise in terms of the number of steps. They might start to learn right and left and stuff like that as they progress from EYFS into Key Stage 1. And probably as an end point for Key Stage 1 in terms of some of the unplugged type of things, yes, we do want to get children to become a little bit more formal in their creation of algorithms. So, I do use flowcharts often sort of, middle end of year 2 onwards, once I've had about a year, 18 months of talking about and doing algorithms in other ways. So I did this little activity with my year 2s, probably about this time last year, sort of at Lanchester, and we talked about our getting up algorithm. What do we do from when we first get up out of bed till we leave the house to come to school? So I had the children sat on the carpet in front of me and I said, what do you do at the start of the day? I get out of bed and I have my breakfast. So I then say, so what? You get out of bed and at the side of your bed, you have your breakfast. No, don't be silly, Mr. Bailey. I've got to go downstairs first. So then again, what? So you get out of bed, you walk downstairs and you eat your breakfast at the bottom of the stairs. No, Mr. Bailey. So you get the idea. That was then I then set them off to do the task. So I just created a flow chart that was blank. I just put the word start in and they had to come up with what they did. So this was what one child had produced by then. The lesson, you can see that they're starting to pick up this idea, being more precise. So the alarm goes off, gets out of bed, walks out the room, goes downstairs, goes in the kitchen, gets out the bowl of cereal and milk, eats the cereal. And that was where I brought them back together again for the plenary of the lesson, because quite clearly there's some steps missing between get out the bowl of cereal and the milk and eat the cereal. And some people might say, well, there's bits missing along the way as well. Of course he is, but it's a bit like a child's bit of writing. We wouldn't say to a child that your writing is wrong. We would teach them how to be more precise, how to add in more features, more content to the writing. And it's the same when we're creating algorithms. To me, that was the first logical, natural step that a 6 or a 7-year-old could pick up on straight away. Oh, yes, of course, I need to pour the cereal into the bowl first, add the milk, I don't just get it out of the cupboard already ready, and so on. But as they go up sort of throughout school, as they get that bit older, then yes, of course, we need to teach them to be more precise as they go along. But you can see hopefully the transition from just a child saying, I get out of bed and have my breakfast, to actually creating as an algorithm and sort of becoming more precise as they go through doing it as an activity. In terms of sort of physical devices, if you like, sort of now how we're almost like, merging between the physical and the digital, the plugged and the unplugged. Well, probably things like roamers and B-bots are probably the things that have been around in schools for a while, and if you still have these things and you haven't got money for anything else, then of course they're great, but there is sort of new things that's starting to come out. I've tried lots of different sort of things over the last few years, so different prices, a bit of a range of things for you here. I do love the blue bot. The blue bot is now, if you like, the replacement in many ways for the B-bot, or is the the advanced sort of product from the B-bot by TTS. So with the blue bot now, you can still use it in the physical way, like what you would with the B-bot of like actually touching the buttons on the top. But there's also an app. You can connect the app to the blue bot by Bluetooth, hence the blue bot, and sort of children can create the algorithm, but then send it via Bluetooth to the blue bot. And I think we've always had a culture that we've seen devices as being a little bit EYFS Key Stage 1. For me, I use something like with my blue bot way into Key Stage 2, because if we think about, when we're given these type of instructions and we're talking about turning 90 degrees anti-clockwise, well, the last time I checked the EYFS curriculum, that wasn't a skill, that children were learning in early years. I think these physical robots and programmable toys, we do need to use them far more into Key Stage 2 than what we've done previously. TTS have brought out an excellent one recently called Rugged Robot, won a BET award, and the EIA awards earlier this year as well. Product that I love, and particularly at the minute when we're doing a lot more outdoor learning with the pupils, we're using it in our forest schools and stuff like that. And both of those devices also have something called a tactile reader, which you can use with them. So you can see there, it's like a blue plastic box where you have the physical tile. So again, you've got that idea of children physically constructing the algorithm, and then again, you can send that via Bluetooth to either the blue bot or to the Rugged Robot. With younger children, I love the Caterpillar by Fisher Price. I think that's a really excellent device. I was just having a bit of look online at the minute. There's some really good offers on that. It's about 50% on some places at the minute. So it costs around about £25, the Caterpillar by Fisher Price. I think that's really good. All the bits connect together by a USB at the back. So again, works great in like a big space like the hall, or large carpet areas in early years, Key Stage 1 classroom, and so on. There's loads you can do with the Caterpillar. And then in terms of those, if you like, wide range of programmable toys that's out there, and there has been hundreds in the last few years, and I've got to say a lot of them are rubbish, quite poor quality, but one that I've found at a good price, if people maybe can't afford the B-bots and the blue bots and stuff like that, there's the Dock Robot by Clementoni, around about £25 again, and I think it's a pretty good robot. You can do some nice stuff along the lines of what you would have done sort of with the B-bot previously. So there's hopefully a few sort of physical devices that you can combine. And if we just think about how we go from algorithms into programs, remember an algorithm becomes a program when it's written in a language that a computer can understand. So I like things like by Busy Things do some really good software, EYFS Key Stage 1, things like helicopter rescues. Again, you can think about linking it, but things like Pre-Coding Penguins by Yellow Door, they do as well as the app. You've got like the physical penguin stones and sort of maps that sort of come with it. So you've got the idea that children can actually like sort of physically construct the algorithm as well as, you know, using the digital device. And obviously we're thinking about algorithms. People are saying as well, where do we use algorithms in everyday life? You know, what's the point? And well, you know, a couple of obvious ones. We've got route algorithms, things like sat navs, or we've got recipes, which are, of course, an example of them. So another busy thing is that path puzzler is like a really good way of like looking at route algorithms. But then, yes, of course, we do like the cooking and the recipe side of things. We might make pizzas, but there's apps out there where you're doing like cooking type apps and stuff like that as well. So again, you can combine the physical and the digital. So that's the end of the Key Stage 1 bit. So I'm not sure, Tim, if we've got any questions sort of just before we go on to Key Stage 2.
No, I haven't any questions. Lots of lovely comments coming through, and yeah, very receptive so far. So I would say go straight to Key Stage 2. We've got about 10 minutes left.
No problem at all. That's bang on.
Yep.
Okay. So
Brilliant.
Just get rid of this video. So moving into Key Stage 2, again, sort of thinking about how we combine the physical and the digital. Again, a fill bag example, sandwich bot, lots of you might have seen. So the idea is that you're now programming a robot to make a jam sandwich. Children are sort of thinking about sort of how something that hasn't had that sort of experience, can't apply logical reasoning to something, how you can give precise and unambiguous instructions. So in many ways, I see things like this as being the link into block-based code. And so if you think about, I would tell the children, you don't need to say scoop 2.4 milligrams of butter. It's been programmed to recognize like a scoop. So if you're thinking about something like Scratch, espresso coding, to code by Purple Mash or whatever, the idea of almost like giving children like blocks and how they would sort of program a robot to make a jam sandwich. But it can be in anything bot, you know, once you've done that once, you can sort of use that idea to do anything sort of in the classroom. So, you know, use that. If you want to see the video of Phil doing it, just look on YouTube or whatever for Sandwich Bot. There's a great example on there. But since the new curriculum came in, we've got to very much think about, well, how does that fit into like our local context? What's the point again? Well, you know, in the northeast of England, Nissan is our biggest employer in the northeast of England. So again, if we're thinking about why are we doing this Unplugged, so why would we do an activity like Sandwich Bot? Well, you know, it may be in 10, 15 years time that our pupils that we teach are working somewhere like Nissan. So it's important that, you know, we try to link with these companies, but we show them the type of things we're doing, that the idea of like how a pretend robot making a jam sandwich would link to like a robot sort of making a Nissan car on the production line and stuff like that. So for both pupils and staff, they've got to see the point and the purpose of what we're doing. Again, bring algorithms into the classroom as much as you can. Don't just make it where you're teaching this block of lessons for 6 or 7 weeks, but, you know, whenever you get the opportunity. So, you know, within your PowerPoint slides, your smarts, whatever it is you're using, you put algorithms in there to do with like, have you finished your work, whatever it might be. I was in a school in the Midlands just before lockdown, and they had like a start a day algorithm. So rather than like the teacher and the TA going, have you got your spellings, have you got your reading, put that in there, they had a start a day algorithm sort of where all pupils came in. It made it nice and calm. They were looking at the algorithm on the board, right, I've got my homework, I put that in the yellow tray, I've got my reading book, I hand that into Mrs. Evans, whatever it might be, and so on. And take the opportunities across the curriculum. You know, I've talked about getting outdoors. So yes, of course, PE lessons are great for teaching things like algorithms. We're often fighting like, how do we fit everything in the timetable each week? Well, you know, have your 1 hour PE lesson where it's PE, but it's doing things like algorithms as well, or geography lessons. You know, if we look at like lots of the apps, lots of the resources we use, we can see a clear link with geography and sort of map work as we come along. And again, even at Key Stage 2, we've got to think that lots of kids are kinesthetic learners. They need to be physically sort of doing something. So if you look at that sort of one in the middle there, we've got Alex, where he's like a robot there. Lots of kids will struggle with that idea of like, you know, turn it to the right, turn it to the left, particularly when it's coming down the screen and that sort of left looks like it's right on the screen and everything else. So I put bits of paper, I get the scrap paper, draw out, and I would physically make that track sort of on the carpet, on the floor, and get kids, like one of you is using the iPad to come up with the algorithm, but then physically somebody is being Alex the robot and is sort of stepping it out. So again, you know, it's not about sort of Unplugged being completely on its own. It's about merging the plugged and the unplugged, the physical and the digital. So think about how you can do that across the curriculum. And again, think about how you're preparing children for a future life, whether it be in industry or whether it be in life. There's probably no map that scares us more than like the London Underground map. I'm sure lots of us have sort of been to London and like been, what the heck, and that, looking at that. So I really use the London Underground as a good example. So a few years ago, on a story, my sister bought me the London board game as a Christmas present. If charades are not enough to finish a family off on Christmas, the London board game, I can assure you, is. So, you know, as I was going through this on Christmas night, the sad teacher that I am was thinking in my head, hang on, there's some ideas here. So I'm not going to do this exactly like the game, but I'm going to take some of the principles of this to sort of use in a lesson. So I came up with this idea of like sort of pick 2 cards. I use the ones from the game, but you could just pick about 30 popular stations, Piccadilly Circus, King's Cross, etc., and, you know, make some little cards on Word Publisher, whatever it might be there. The children then have to sort of create a route. You create a route sort of to get to your partner. So I'm going from A to B, my partner's going from B to A, and so on. And I really don't over teach. I say to teachers a lot, don't talk through it too much, otherwise you're not seeing what the children are doing. So the first time I just set them off, go on then, right, you've got to sort of prepare your route. And then maybe after about 10 minutes, I'll bring them back again. Well, what type of language have we got sort of there? What's precise? All right, what about the lines of color? We're going northbound or we're going southbound. How many stops change? You know, often I like photocopy the sheet and then say, right, turn on the back, do it again, now being more precise. But you've got like apps now, like Tube Map, there's websites out there, completely free of charge, where you can look at the sort of routes. So again, we're combining the physical and the digital, the unplugged and the plugs. We're giving kids sort of real life skills. And there's loads, you know, I've given like another example there about verbal instructions on the screen. There's absolutely loads you can do with something like the London Underground map. So the next time somebody is in London, you can pick up the little maps, you know, pick up a pile of sort of 30 of them. It's amazing what you can get away with as a teacher. Or you can buy, you know, large laminated London Underground maps. They work really well, you know. So next time you're in like places like the Works and you say, you know, like the French numbers 1 to 20 and stuff like that, have a look in those sort of bargain bins. Can you get some London Underground maps? Works really well for doing things like underground algorithms sort of there. And again, things like precise instructions, have a look at sort of, you know, maybe drawn characters. So this was a book I found in my loft a little while ago, Flanimals by Ricky Gervais of sort of Office fame, and there's more Flanimals of the Deep and so on. But then what I'll do is like I'll sort of give each child a Flanimal. So, you know, I might print them out, laminate them, and so on. So let's say, for example, this carrot on the right here, somebody had that Flanimal. They'd be sitting back to back with a partner. They'd have to describe that Flanimal to their partner, you know. So think about the precise language that would come out. It's really frustrating because you can see it, but think about, you know, again, how would you describe that precisely to your character, to your partner? So you've got this idea that it's a circular shape, but then I've heard people say it's a bit like a space hopper. It's like a rubber glove with only 4 fingers on the top. You know, think about the position of the eyes. What would you say they are? 2/3 of the way up. You know, it's not really arms, it's just hands on the side. What about the feet? Oh, well, they're more like toes. There's 6 circles. They're getting ever bigger as they get towards the middle, and so on. So then see what the child's produced. All right, how would I have to make that more precise? And I took that idea from one of the ones from Barefoot. They've got an activity in there called Crazy Characters, and it was sort of based on that type of idea there. But, you know, if you're looking at one there, how to create, draw a tribob, you know, think, how would you almost debug that? How would you make that more precise? You can see some precise language in there, like tiny and stuff like that. But, you know, add a tail. Where am I adding a tail? You know, things need to be unambiguous sort of there. Add 3 tiny legs at the bottom. Do they mean like somebody's bottom, or do they mean, you know, at the bottom there? Draw a triangle. What type of triangle? Is it an isosceles? Is it an equilateral? And so on. So loads of things you can do around precise instructions. And again, sort of from the Barefoot site, you can get these as some really nice posters I tend to find with a lot of that vocabulary again, sort of, you know, explained nice and clearly for both pupils and for staff. And again, just thinking about sort of how that all links together. So it's not just about doing the unplugged things on their own. It's about sort of how there's different apps, how there's different software that almost cross over from the unplugged to the plug there. So there's a one Codable that I really like using. I've mentioned Alex before. There's Lightbot and Lightbot Junior. There's Lego Mindstorms, Fix a Factory, and so on. And lots of these, like I say, you know, will cross over from, you know, physical to digital, plug to unplug. You can get children physically almost being the robots and, you know, moving about the classroom. I've had with Codable where people have made like pom-poms and stuff like that to represent the Codable sort of characters on there. But all the time we're thinking about how algorithms link into programs, that an algorithm's a precise precise step-by-step set of instructions, but a program becomes an algorithm when it is written in a language that a computer can understand. All programs are algorithms, but not all algorithms are programs. It's essential that Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 staff understand that. So hopefully over the last 40 minutes or so, when we're thinking about computer program, when we're thinking about, computer science at Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, EYFS as well, what we've realized is that it's not just about coding. And in my experience, there's been a lot of that over the last 6 years. I visit schools and, what are you doing? Oh, we're using Scratch, we're using that. But it's often a little bit Blue Petery. They're given a set of cards, follow this, follow that, follow that. Something happens on the screen. If we are really wanting to develop computational thinkers, if we are wanting to develop children that can change the world, then computer programs got to not just be coding. It's got to be coding and computational thinking. And I've put computational thinking in bold there because in many ways, for me, that's the more important bit. If you can teach the computational thinking, if children have got that, teaching them how to code becomes easy. But if you try to teach somebody how to code without that computational thinking already behind them, then it becomes that much harder. So hopefully I've given you some really good examples from EYFS into Key Stage 1, but making sure that the unplugged stuff doesn't stop as we get into Key Stage 2 and how there's some good examples that we can use. And obviously the majority of things I've shown you, other than a few sort of apps, a few programmable toys, are either free or you can pick up sort of very cheap in sort of bargain bins and stuff like that. So thank you everyone for joining. I think I looked at one point and I seen there was about 50 or 60 online, so very touched, very humbled that you took the time and the opportunity to attend my session this morning. There's all my details on the screen. As Tim said, there's a PDF handout of all my slides which you can download, but if you want to sort of interact with me after the session, by all means drop me an email, connect on social media, and if you'd like to work with me or like to hear from me in the future, I'd be delighted to speak to you and carry on the conversations that we've had this morning. So I'll hand back to Tim for the last 5 minutes. If there's any questions or anything anybody wants to ask, I'd be happy to do so.
Martin, thank you very much. That was ace. I took a lot away myself. I think the comments on the questions tab similarly reflect the positivity all round. One person said it's the best session they've attended yet. One person has sent their appreciation as someone who appreciates the London Underground and its use in these circumstances. We've had one question though, asking, did you say that there was a difference between algorithms and instructions?
Yeah, so to me, sort of an algorithm is like instructions plus. So I give the example, as a Key Stage 1 teacher, maybe a Year 2 teacher. If you were doing instructional writing and you were talking about saying how to get ready, if a child wrote and finally put on your shoes, you'd be very happy with that as a Year 2 teacher as a bit of instructional writing. They've got it in the correct order, good words like finally there. But if you were talking about how to get ready as an algorithm, almost comparing it to this idea of like a robot trying to sort of follow that, it'd be no good just saying, and finally put on your shoes. The algorithm's got to be broke down into those more precise steps. So there might actually be 12 or 15 little mini steps involved in putting on your shoes. So an algorithm is like instructions plus. It's not that they're not instructions, but they've got to be that much more precise than how we normally think about instructions away from sort of computing.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, that was brilliant, an excellent session. I've taken a lot away myself, as I said. So I'm just going to sum up a little bit. Lots of unplugged exercises there, lots of reinforcement about how to use them in cross-curriculum activities. I particularly loved in the Key Stage 2 stuff around, start the day algorithm and how, all those little things, just the ways in which you can weave it across other subjects. And as you say, the computational thinking is central. Learn that, embrace that, and the coding comes from that. I think lots and lots of reinforcement. So the next session this afternoon is John Lamb, who's going to be talking about something called Mindtest, which is an open source alternative to Minecraft that can be used to teach a variety of different subjects, and that's at 1 o'clock. Other than that, I hope to see you at other sessions in the showcase. Please do continue to spread the word. using the hashtag CAS Virtual 20, and sure to send some lovely tweets to Martin. His handle is animate2educate on Twitter. That's the number 2. Other than that, Martin, thank you so much. I will take a little screenshot of all these lovely comments and send them over to you as well.
That'd be lovely. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for attending this morning. It's strange not seeing faces. It's a different way of doing things, and I don't think I've ever presented in shorts and a t-shirt before, but it was too hot for anything else this morning. So you know, hopefully my experience of being sort of digital when I would normally be physical doing this thing hasn't detracted from the session too much for people.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone, and have a good afternoon, day, evening.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you everyone. Take care now. Bye.